Welcome back to another episode of Thought Behind Things. आज हमारे साथ मौजूद हैं 3 बहुत ही खास मेहमान. So recently, if you guys remember, we had a conversation with Amir Ibrahim from Jazz, जिनसे हमने 5G के बारे में पूछा था और बड़ा उन्होंने इंसाइट दी थी कि पाकिस्तान में 5G की क्या सूरत हाल है, किस तरफ सिचुएशन जा रही है, and whether we're gonna see 5G coming to Pakistan anytime soon. And for that, we thought we just create a panel, and we have some very exciting guests for you today. For starters, we have Yang Gu, who's the brand director of Oppo South Asia. We also have Badar Khushnood, who's the chairman of Pasha. He's going to be representing the software industry side of things and just sort of some of the policy side of things. We also have Akram Ali, who's the head of business development at Pro Pakistani. If you guys remember, Pro Pakistani was I guess the only outlet that aggressively covered the 3G, 4G launch in Pakistan as well. And they have a huge, long pedigree of covering tech and telecom in Pakistan. So we'd love to hear more about, where the government's at, where the telco's at, just some of the insight on where 5G is at right now in Pakistan. But thank you so much to all the guests for being part of the show.
Thank you very much for inviting us.
Thank you so much.
Yang, I'm going to start with you, just sort of trying to understand a little bit about your life before Oppo and, how you ended up here in Pakistan.
Okay, so previously I started my career in China. So I was in advertisement, digital marketing, and public relationship back in China. And then I moved to Eastern Europe region for Oppo PR manager role. So, and then I decided to shift here in Pakistan because I'm, really pretty much fond of the market, fond of the people here. That's why I moved. Yeah.
And how long have you been in Pakistan?
1 year.
How do you like it so far?
I love it.
Really?
Here. Yeah.
And you're based out of Lahore?
Yeah, in Lahore.
Awesome. Tell me a little bit about Oppo, because I understand it's now the top 4 global manufacturers of smartphones, essentially, right?
Yeah, we are among the top 4 because smartphone industry is kind of very competitive. The market, fluctuated sometimes, but we are like recent years we are like stably among the top 4 smartphone brands.
And yeah. So when did it start? How did it evolve into the top 4?
Interesting fact is that like Oppo started in China like back in 2004.
Right.
A very interesting fact is like when we first start, we were actually doing MP3 player back in China. So actually we have a long history of researching into audio like that. And previously we were, one of like our Blu-ray player actually was one of the top in the European market.
Right.
So, like here people feels like Oppo sells smartphone for sure, but actually we're not only a smartphone company, we are a technology company. So we have, very deep research and development strengths in a lot of fields, like I mentioned, audio. And also right now, today, we're going to talk about 5G and also imaging technology, design, and also charging technology.
Right. And what about Pakistan? So when did you guys launch in Pakistan? And I know for a fact now that Oppo is one of the leading brands in Pakistan as well.
Yeah.
So that's complicated and difficult, right? Because the Pakistani market tends to stick to the brands that they've known for the longest time, and they have that trust there as well. So how did you manage to sort of capture that market and have Oppo here?
We came here relatively early. We were here like first in 2014, like 10 years after we born. So we just choose Pakistan and we enter here like way before we entered the other market like Europe.
Right.
So we started here, like we first brought our product here to test the water. The first device we, received very good response is the F series.
Right.
Because, F series was known as a selfie expert. And somehow, our strengths like somehow match the market because people here, like we can see that they like taking photos, they like taking selfies. They are pretty much fond of partying and, connect with each other. So that's why, our F series got quite good response in the first place. And then later we started to bring Reno series as well and more like very exciting technology kind of product here.
Right. And you guys, if I remember this correctly, early on, you guys launched more of the higher end versions with like these exclusive camera features, but then you eventually went into the more affordable markets as well. If I were to ask you, what's the bigger sell in Pakistan? Is it the, the selfie sort of higher end versions, or is it the more, consumer, like pocket friendly, affordable consumer models?
Okay, so like when we see the market here, actually the market here is huge. Like we have a huge population here. For Oppo, like what we are doing right now, because we always produce like higher quality device, and we spend a lot of time and effort into researching the technology that we are really good at. So like for us, we have a wide range of technology product, but we mostly target the young people for like without F series product, and also the those who is fond of professional photography and videography without Reno product. Yeah.
Right. Tell me a little bit about some of the exciting, because you mentioned research and development, right? And I know that you guys are working on some very exciting new tech as well. So what's coming up with Oppo? And are we going to see some of those newer products? Because we tend to hear, I go on a pro-Pakistani blog and I hear about this new projector or something coming up, and I find out it's only in China or somewhere else in the world. Can you tell us some of the exciting things that are coming up, and whether we'll be seeing them in Pakistan as well?
Mm-hmm. So last year, actually, we have introduced our first foldable phone. Mm-hmm. So basically, this foldable phone, we call it Oppo Find N. It's really beautiful in terms of screen. So it has like very less, you can see like it's flat overall. So it gives you a more like beautiful kind of visual film. Yeah.
And this has a main screen over here, and then there's a main foldable screen.
Yeah, and in terms of size, it's like a kind of like golden ratio, because like when you fold it, it's very easy to hold on your hand, and when you unfold it, it's
very
a large
convenient.
screen.
It's not. Most of the foldable phones seem like a mini laptop in your hand, but it's actually pretty nifty.
Yeah, very cool, handy, because like Oppo, we are pretty much into design, and apart from that, we're also doing our IoT ecosystem. So we have been introducing our AR glass. It's actually not the first AR glass that we are introducing, but it is the one which is really close to commercialization. So as you can see, like normally the AR glass is very huge, covering your home face. You can't go out with it. But this AR glass is very light, and it attached.
Oh, it's modular essentially.
Yes, it attached to the glass very easily, and it can achieve certain features like the business-wise. It can achieve like translation, real-time translation. It can also help you to do like lectures, give a speech, because it shows the screen, and it can easily connect to your smartphone or your smartwatches. So when you're doing exercise, you can see your data, your health figures very easily.
And so there's a screen on that glass. Can I see that?
Sure.
Oh wow! So there's an actual screen over here, and so essentially you can throw anything from there to here.
Right now, the features are still conceptual. Mm-hmm. So back in China, you can do like map navigation like that. Overseas, like actually right now, it's more of a business kind of feature, and your basic like location and health data like that.
And so when you talk about real-time translation, for example, is that the phone that's taking the audio and translating that and pushing it on the glasses?
Our direction is actually, if you have two AR glass, you can do the real-time translate. For instance, you speak Urdu, I speak English. Eventually, what we want to achieve is that when we look at each other, we can see the translation real-time directly on the mini screen.
Right, without having to connect it to the smartphone?
No, like you have to connect to your smartphone, but still like you can translate between the
Real time.
AR glass, like you can communicate.
That's pretty amazing. And is this essentially using high speed like 5G internet to achieve these things?
Yes,
Right.
yes. It requires faster network.
Understandably. And speaking of faster network, I'm going to now move to Badar. First of all, thank you for being part of the show, and great to have you back. I mean, you had the longest chat on this show with Badar, 2 hours 30 minutes. The last time, you just reminding us, the last time we started recording at 12 and we ended up at 2:30. So thank you for that.
Somebody even yesterday told me that I just listened to your podcast, and my question was, did you listen to the whole thing? And he said yes, the whole 2 hours.
So, I mean, people do listen.
Yeah, people do listen. So thank you so much.
So, Badar, tell me a little bit about where is the software industry at, and when it comes to high speed internet and broadband internet. I mean, what can we potentially see? What can we dream in terms of 5G? And also, one thing I'd like to understand, when we talk about 5G, is this wireless broadband that we're talking about? Or because we do, I believe, have higher speeds on fiber. So is there a use case for wireless for the industry?
So, Muzamil, thank you so much. And Yang, welcome to Pakistan. I'll, if you don't mind, I'll keep it a little bilingual so that everyone can benefit from our audience as well. So, Muzamil, what is happening is that the software industry in Pakistan is growing in two different directions, both in the good directions, by the way. One is the local digital transformation, which is where the pure IT tech companies are helping non-tech sectors like agriculture, fisheries, textile, whatever you can think of. And the other is pure software development, where these companies are exporting either products or services purely out of Pakistan. Right. Both sectors are growing rapidly.
Right.
And I think COVID really accelerated that part, because all those digital wants now became needs.
Right. And we're looking at maybe let's say Food Panda or Kareem's of the world and all of those
services. From e-commerce to any enabled service. Absolutely. Right. Fintech, you name it, and it's even gaming. Gaming is in Pakistan in the last few years have really improved, both digital gaming, and you see a lot of interest both in game development and even game playing.
Right.
And people are realizing that, it's a pay-per game, or so they're realizing that it's a monetizable.
It's an industry essentially.
Absolutely. Yeah. So it's a global industry, and we can actually be a part of that as well. So I think from Pakistan perspective, Pakistan is growing in both directions. All our traditional sectors need to be transformed digitally. And hence IT, both hardware, software, and even connectivity as an infrastructure has to be there. And the other is, of course, the exports part. But remember, especially for exports, we need to do a lot of R&D.
Right.
And for R&D, because the developers have to be ahead of the consumers.
Right.
Of course, they need to do R&D, they need to develop products, they need to productize. As Yang was mentioning, they need to commercialize products from a concept to a commercialization part. So hence, we need fundamental infrastructure as software development industry. We need infrastructure before an end consumer would need it eventually.
Right.
Because we need to develop products based on that. So as you asked, I think this is more like wireless connectivity, but at scale.
Right.
So I think some of the benefits 5G will certainly have is, of course, speed is certainly there. But I think the more important thing is the latency part. I think that's where 5G really grows big, that it will have a near real-time connectivity. But I think we'll talk about the use cases later on that. But the other thing is that, the current networks get stuck up when there's large volume of data or connectivity or users connected to the same system. I think that's where 5G will again be sorting those out. So I think 5G will, and the most important thing is 5G is going to be consuming far less power.
Right.
So I think overall, we need to develop use cases, we need to develop new products and services, which may not be in demand right now. End user may not know what they really need. But I think we need to understand their challenges and then come up with use cases which can be leveraged through newer technologies. So I think this is where Pakistan has evolved from CDMA to GSM to 4G. And of course, we need to migrate to the best technologies faster and quicker. I think we need to leapfrog. We need to move faster. Our economy needs more. And we are a young population. So we are a more connected power. As Yang earlier mentioned, we are a very strong youth-based population, and I think we have an opportunity to not only give them the development options, but also the usage options as well.
I think one of the most insightful things that you just mentioned, and I was speaking to Parvez Abbasi yesterday, and he mentioned his experience with Mobile Zone and how back in early 2000s, Pakistan was Pakistan was actually far ahead of the region.
Correct.
In terms of launching cell phones, and he mentioned that Mobile Zone was actually selling all the cell phones in Afghanistan and Bangladesh and a lot of these countries who hadn't jumped onto the telecom bandwagon. And then somewhere down the line, even with 3G, 4G, we were a
Sorry to
little
interrupt you,
later.
but I think that's when we migrated to GSM far earlier than the rest of the world.
Right.
I remember back then traveling to the US, and I realized that they were still on CDMA and Pakistan was on GSM. So it was more like we were more advanced, and that's absolutely was true. And I think that's where our tele density grew rapidly as well.
Right. And so, it's one thing to really think about the consumer side of things. Okay, how many people are going to use 5G, and when you're looking at the economics of it, it's also important to look at the big picture, because earlier you mentioned, for a lot of these exporters, who by the way are bringing in the dollars that we so direly need every few years, maybe the unit economics might not make sense in the government perspective with the consumer, but it would definitely make sense in terms of the larger economy and the dollar inflow that we can potentially tap into. So that's a new direction altogether. Akram, you've been covering this for a while now, and I know that Pro-Pakistani is historically been very aggressively looking at this industry. Tell me a little bit about, first of all, yourself and how you ended up being in Pro-Pakistani and being in this industry.
Thank you so much for having me. I always wanted to come on your show, but finally I got the invite. So I started working in Pro-Pakistani back in 2015. I used to work for a store. We used to sell these online merchandise like Nike, Adidas, and I used to work on Amazon. So I used to handle the storefront. So I have a digital marketing expertise, and I worked there for like 6 years. Right. And it's because I am a tech lover, and that's why at Pro-Pakistani, apart from the business development thing, I do the tech reviews, and it's my hobby. Right. Because when I started using computer, it was a Pentium 4 era, and since then things have been evolving, and I'm loving them. Because I believe that the updated model has better things as compared to the previous one. So coming back to Pro-Pakistani, when I started working at Pro-Pakistani, we were just like 5-10 people working from home, and there was no office. So I used to tell these guys that, I'm married, I cannot work from home, so let's get an office. So we got an office, and then alhamdulillah, now we are more than 90 to 100 people.
Really?
Yeah. So tech sector coverage is very extensive, that I can tell you something that telcos guys, they call me and confirm the news. Where did you get it from? And I'm like, I don't know. Reporters are magicians here because they don't tell us the sources and all. So Pro-Pakistani has been there since 2008, right. And Amir Bhai started it on his own, and he was telling us all these stories that he was sitting and he booked a domain name and he didn't know what to do with it, and then eventually it became this.
Right.
So this is like the whole journey of myself and Pro-Pakistani.
Awesome. And tell me a little bit about what's happening on the 5G front. Where do we see the government at? Where do we see the telecom sector at?
All right. So government side is more of they're all set to launch it. All they have to do is hire a consultant and set the minimum bid price. Mm-hmm. Other than that, they are all good to go. It was supposed to happen in March 2023, but political instability has caused delays. And this was said by IT Minister, by the way. I'm quoting him.
Right. So 2023 means next year.
Yeah, next year. But now it might happen the licensing might happen in June or July.
Right.
Maybe even Q3. So these are the reports as far as the government is concerned. Telcos, on the other hand, they for the global 5G rollout, you need to have 70% of 4G users. In Pakistan, we have 42%.
Right.
Also, you have to upgrade your infrastructure a lot.
When you say 42%, is that like 42% of all mobile data users?
It's
or
like
is
4G, yeah. 4G adoption of all mobile data users percentage. Like let's say if there are 100 people, 70 should be using 4G, but in Pakistan there are 42 using 4G. So global standards are like 70%. So on the other side, like it needs a lot of investments and costings for telcos to have those ground preparations and to meet the benchmark levels, you know. So on this side, I mean, there are still like a lot of work to do. Baki Badar bhai is here. He can, you know, tell you about what's going on.
I remember, sorry, Akram, agar aapko uske bare mein pata ho कि there was a test as well, I believe.
I was there. Yeah. And so I was there in that test. So it was in controlled environment.
Okay.
So
and who did that? Was that Zong or
Zong.
Mobile?
It was Zong, yeah.
And what was the test about?
It was about 5G speed test.
Okay.
Like,
So they actually added like one of the towers and tested 5G.
Yeah, it was at their, if I remember it correctly, it was at their office and they did it and they did quite well because it was like in controlled environment, tested and everything. So it was good. Yeah, I witnessed it.
And when was that?
I think 1.5 or 2 years back.
Achha, so that, I mean, it's been a while
long
since
time.
then.
Yeah,
and
it's been a
nothing's
long
happened since
time.
then.
Yeah.
But tell me a little bit about, again, so Akram mentioned the government side of things and they have like a general plan and they're going ahead with that plan. But then really the point of contention is at the telco side, right? And there are two areas where the problem really lies. One is the cost of license itself, which is a very huge upfront cost, and you really need to have the right business model to be able to get that out. And the second is the infrastructure cost, right? And I do understand when you have a license that is in dollars, with the current way that the economy is flowing, a lot of companies would be very wary of really making new investments in Pakistan until things stabilize for the time being. But also when it comes to the logistics of it, if I understand this correctly, I think the coverage area of 5G towers is actually much less. So you have to add a whole lot more towers.
Correct.
So I'm assuming that's
The
going
mesh
to
has to be larger.
Mesh has to be larger, and so I'm assuming the cost of infrastructure would be higher as well. Does that really mean? I mean, so it seems to me, based on that conclusion, that it doesn't make a lot of sense for us to be even thinking about 5G right now.
Absolutely, Muzamil. I think there are challenges. I think with every new technology, especially at this scale, in an emerging market, there are always challenges. But I think we need to have a long-term vision here. I think that's where the government needs to think more pragmatically and work with commercial businesses, of course, telcos and hardware providers and everyone. Maybe, I think this is exactly what we are thinking about, the blockchains and the cryptos and all of those. I think all of these technologies they're more like a double-edged sword.
Right.
And the government needs to probably bring together the specialists on a table, have a strategic dialogue, and come up with a solution on how best to sort this out. There's no question that we won't need it. There's no question that we will not have it. The question is, how soon can we get it? How soon can we be better than other emerging markets so that we can not only develop products in advance and then leapfrog, and then develop solutions for the rest of the world on these technologies, based on these technologies. So it's totally up to us to take lead or be a follower again at some point in time. So I think it's better to take lead. Our economy really needs better technologies. And again, I go back to the fact the reason we need more technologies is that we have a very young youth bulge population. And I think they are more tech savvy. They are digital natives. We do not have a aging population. So hence we need to bring more and better technologies, faster and better technologies to Pakistan. And we of course need to weigh in the pros and cons I'm not saying that we should just go ahead blindly, but we need to bring all the stakeholders to the table, create an emergency, set the targets, and start maybe even figure out if there are better ways on licensing as well.
Okay, so what would that mean?
I'll give you an example. So in technology, one of our suggestions is that to create special technology zones.
Right.
And I think there could be another option that those zones can at least be 5G connected. to start off.
So at least the business side of things can begin to,
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So that before it gets to the consumerism part, we need to get to the productization and the commercialization and R&D part to be done here as well. So that we need to develop local apps, local content, everything which is more use case based on these new technologies. So I think, by the way, Ministry of IT has been super progressive, and a lot of things. Ministry of Commerce has been super progressive. I think they both need to sit together and understand what are the challenges from a private sector perspective, and I'm sure they can find some creative ways to solve the licensing and the hardware cost.
Okay, so this is interesting. What you've essentially mentioned is like a sort of like a sandbox environment, test rollout, where maybe even if you want to have like a license for the mass market rollout, before that you essentially define some zones and say, listen, test your things over here. The cost of logistics is less as well. It's a controlled environment, and at least you can be able to give some of the business users the early access that's going to help the economy as well in the long run.
Absolutely. And Muzamil, I'm sure there's always an argument that people don't need it. My argument there is that people don't understand why they need it. Number one. Number two, a lot of people don't really take for example health tech. People wouldn't understand why they need the MRIs and the CT scans when there were X-rays. Of course, because they're not medical specialists. So of course the industry has to take lead there. And create use cases, because people will then understand how they can benefit from such technologies. So I think it is our responsibility, it is government's responsibility, representing the people of Pakistan, to actually take leapfrogs and then find solutions so that we can solve our biggest challenges. Agri-tech is a challenge right now. We are an agri-based economy. We are a lot of our industries' productivity is far lower than global averages. So we need to improve there as well. We need a lot of IoTs and the ARs and the VRs part. So I think we have existing use cases which have been there incumbently, and we need to solve them. And I think we need better technologies for that. There's no question about it.
Right. Badar was talking about some use cases, and I know that you guys are aggressively working on the consumer tech side of things and really sort of activating a lot of those use cases. And I know that 5G is a huge part of Oppo's future as well. Tell me a little bit about what you guys are doing when it comes to 5G. And you also mentioned the augmented reality glasses and how some of these things actually require those high-speed internet rails for the consumers to be able to benefit from. So what does the 5G future look like if you just talk about the globe, to be honest, at the start?
From Oppo side, actually we are, researching in 5G into two directions. So first is we have a standardized team, particularly doing the 5G standardized work. Like they set the standards, and they're they're participating in different market with the operators, with the technology companies, basically for, testing out better technology for 5G. For example, like we have a 5G lab with Aristotle. So we have joined, collaborating in terms of like 5G slicing technology like that. And we are actively testing out in Europe. I think follow up with Badar, just said, is that actually, when we see Europe market in terms of general public, people are very conservative to new technology. There's a lot of controversial in terms of 5G rollout like that, but it's still the duty of the industry to test the new technology out and push out the new things, because we are more we can see more benefits from the industry side in the long run, right? So what we have been doing is in Europe, we were the first to introduce commercialized 5G phone back then when the 5G SA network was testing. So we were the first to introduce a commercialized 5G phone that was Renault 5G, I remember, like back in 2019. Yeah. So, and then we are also collaborating with Ericsson and Vodafone. We test out the first pre-commercialized 5G network, SA network, in one of the university in UK. So we built this small-scale network to test out how this network and to listen to the real users' feedback. And also recently, what we have just done is together with Qualcomm and Ericsson, we built another enterprise level 5G slicing network again to test it out.
Okay, so my understanding is that the sort of boosters routers or the 5G routers are being provided by Ericsson, and you guys are providing the devices. Is that correct?
We have a joint lab. So both of us, like different, partners, we're providing our, technology, because 5G slicing technology was from our end as well, actually. So we're doing like joint research and development for the 5G technology. And of course, like Oppo, we also have a lot of like basic technology, smart technology, let's say, from the device end. For instance, we have our smart 5G, like we have invested a lot of efforts just to make the device smarter, and it can be easily connected to different type of operators network.
Right.
And also we have like dual connectivity. For instance, like it allows your 5G device to connect to both 5G and Wi-Fi to provide like better speed, let's say, like 28% actually like faster speed and lower power consumption as well.
Right.
Yeah.
And what do you think about Pakistan? I mean, do you think there is a real, I mean, we were talking earlier about Pakistan and launching 5G here. Do you think there's a real requirement or potential for 5G in Pakistan?
Of course. I think Pakistan, like the key obstacles is that, of course, like the 4G penetration and the investment. But still, if we look at the long run, actually, because we have, huge population, and especially people here are so passionate of new technology, and will tend to be more open to what is coming next. So in my opinion, I think 5G might be the next big changer, like game changer in Pakistan, because right now we're like in a struggle, but we need something more to boost the vitality, let's say. So that's why that's the fascinating part of a new technology, because it sometimes triggers the demand. It's not the demand came first and then the new technology comes, right?
Right.
Like sometimes it's like the speed itself like change everything. So for instance, when we look at 10 years back, like we can't imagine like 10 years back, I believe like we're also in the discussion of why we need 4G, like we already have 3G, we already have 2G. Why we need such speed? It's just a number, right? But like now we are so get used to smartphone. Previously we were using feature phone, and we enjoy this kind of like internet service, of course due to COVID. But if we don't have 4G, maybe this type of service might not that easily be captured by the general users. So I think 5G actually opens a new future for us. Like we can't actually, like it's also hard for me to tell what kind of service will come through, but it provides this kind of like platform for the new technology to reach like the startup or the enterprise, those people who has creativity, who have visions to create new kind of service. And that type of service will change our life forever.
100%. And globally, if I were to ask you, where is the 5G rollout standing right now? I mean, are there countries that have 5G, actively available? Or are we still in the testing and sort of licensing phase?
Some of countries are already available. Some European countries like is already there. And China like is very aggressively building 5G stations right now. And also we are collaborating, like when 5G was quite new to China before, like Oppo was also, starting this kind of Spark project with all of the operators so that we can test out the speed and also hear from the users, their feedback on 5G and what else we can do. So this is basically what we're doing right now. And also Korea, also very aggressive on 5G as well. So UAE also. So I believe like there are, countries that are taking like step forward to trying to capture this market.
Makes sense. Akram, if I were to ask you, can you share some of the use cases pertaining to the Pakistani industry of what we could imagine a world with 5G?
So we cannot imagine. I mean, because I have seen a lot of real use cases. I must confess that I also had a very limited scope of 5G in my mind, though I'm a part of Pro Pakistani, but trust me, I had a very limited scope of 5G.
Yeah, because I mean, when I think 5G, I just think faster YouTube videos, right?
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, I'm a user perspective, that's it. But I went to a conference in China and I've seen a lot of use cases. So first of all, being a journalist, we need DSNGs and a lot of expensive equipment to get things done, to get the live coverage.
Right.
There was a 5G backpack which I wore, and it was all good to go because latency is a
entire
problem.
van into a backpack.
Into a backpack, and I understood it so well that they took me in ad of that product.
Right.
By the way, so other than this, I've seen robotic arms. They were picking up trash, and they used to work for 24 hours non-stop, and they differentiate the things like cans in the separate bin and papers in the separate bin, so stuff like that. Also, there were drone cameras. You must have heard about drone cameras recognizing people,
Right.
but it was more than that. So they used to recognize your facial expressions, either you are a criminal or not. So
Interesting.
they are using tech to get to the thieves, in
Right.
simple words. Also, there were these drone cameras which used to identify the issues at grid stations and electric poles where human lives were in danger, because when you get to a pole, then health and safety concerns are there. So they used to identify that issue and then send the teams to rectify them. So when it comes to Pakistan, I mean, I've seen a surgeon performing surgery remotely sitting in his own house through robotic arms. So in Pakistan, this is a big issue that you need to call the surgeon. We are blessed. We live in Islamabad, Karachi. When my father had this heart attack, the surgeon was there like in 10 minutes.
Right.
But in remote and rural areas, this
And
is a
considering
big,
40%
big
of our
problem.
population is in rural areas.
Yeah,
essentially.
and this is a big problem, and we need to get 5G ASAP. Like Yang said, that it could be a big game-changing boost for Pakistan's economy, because you see these little internet-based companies like Careem and Uber, which were being taken as non-serious businesses, but they are contributing a lot in Pakistan's economy.
Right.
So Badar bhai is here. A lot of internet companies have become big things, and 5G, if 5G is there, all their limitations will be removed and they can perform miracles in the field.
Right.
So these are some of the use cases I mentioned. I've seen them personally.
Yeah.
And they can bring a lot of change.
Yeah, 100%. Badar bhai, I think one of the interesting things that Yang mentioned and that really opened my mind was, maybe whatever use cases that we're thinking, maybe a lot of the future we don't even know yet. And I think when I really look at 4G and evolution of that, I think for most part she's right. At the time you were like, why do we really need 4G, right?
Yeah.
And the fact is, immediately after that, because the world was at 4G, the videos were higher quality, the transfer speeds were higher, so the storage was higher, the processing was higher, and so some of the basic things that we used to interact with had become so enriched with data that our conventional phones weren't enough for them, and so I think you mentioned earlier of leapfrogging. I think leapfrogging is a nice to have for a developing country. For me, I think we're going to lose if we don't have the right technologies at the right time. I mean, we look at the IT industry, right? And every single time we have, I've had so many discussions. We had the discussion with you as well, but so many people, and every person tells me about the 90s and how we were right at the cusp of, really being a part of it. And then we saw Philippines and India and Indonesia and, all of these countries literally overtaking us by miles, and now we're just sitting here sad thinking about how we can increase a potential industry, and really it's about the job creation for me.
Yeah.
So can you tell me some of the commercial use cases and really how do we convince, because I do understand the problem you mentioned earlier, the money problem is really there, and for example, you mentioned that maybe we could have these sort of pocket zones or sandbox environments, but then even after that, maybe if we're still gonna wait for the demand, it's never gonna happen. right? And so maybe there is a different model where, if I think about it as a data consultant, I used to work at this company that used to provide data solutions. And I remember an average solution to a company would be $1 million. And then these cloud companies started coming in and they started offering these sort of pay-as-you-grow services, right? And so many people, it was just a very simple way to solve that problem. And those companies, in the start, everybody was like, oh, even when you're going to go for a pay-as-you-grow, you're not going to make as much money. Let's just get money up front. But the fact is, in its eventuality, you actually end up making more money.
Right.
So can we have a potential solution like that?
So actually, Muzamil, I want to add actually a couple of things to the conversation which Yang just talked about, the challenge in Pakistan and why we really need it. So recently at Pasha, we did a research with Google. And it's available online by the title of Unlocking Pakistan's Digital Potential. It was a few months exercise. We did hire professional economists and statisticians in Singapore with Google, and we did a full-blown study. And actually, we launched it with the President of Pakistan. That study concluded that if Pakistan deploys 8 technologies in their traditional sectors, in our traditional sectors like agri-tech and textiles and all of those, Pakistan can create a new economy of $60 billion every year.
Every year?
Every year. It's an annual new economy of $60 billion.
That's a 20% of your total GDP every year.
Correct. And that, what we need to do is bring technologies like AI, artificial intelligence, machine learning, ML, IoTs. And I'll stop at IoT. Just one use case of IoT is a super important business use case. All of our manufacturing needs to be digitized as well. Right now, our inefficiencies are far more higher. Our productions are not efficient. Similarly, our productivity in agri sector is far lower than our regional and global competitors. So we need to improve sensors there. We need to bring connectivity there. And all of that is just 5G. You can't do it on 4G.
Yeah.
There's a limitation on number of devices. There's a limitation on power consumption. There's a limitation on data speeds. So there are tons of reasons which professionals would understand that we already need something better than 4G. And that's 5G, of course.
Right.
And of course, there'll be R&Ds, there'll be new technologies coming in and all of those things. But I think there's a huge opportunity for Pakistan to leapfrog, not only in actually adopting new technology, but implementing that into our traditional sectors and growing and improving our sectors there. Just imagine if we improve 50% of our textile production, if we improve 50% of our agriculture output, if we introduce new agriculture products there, if we grow new kinds of seeds, all of those needs better technology. And that's exactly where we need it. And I think the most important thing is we need to understand with every new technology, the first use case is entertainment, as you mentioned. Your mindset was 4G means faster YouTube.
Yeah.
Absolutely true.
Yeah.
With every new technology, the first use case is entertainment.
Right.
And people will experiment. People will play around with it. Once they get used to it, they'll jump onto what else can I do with it. And now people are doing Amazons, freelancing, tons of other things. So just imagine that with 4G deployment across Pakistan, you have more freelancers working across Pakistan.
Yeah.
Because they're connected better to the world. They can offer their services sitting within their 4 walls, within their homes, especially girls and women who for many reasons can't really go out, can still deliver and add to the economy in dollar value, which, as you mentioned, we already need very desperately. And hence, I think there's no confusion that we need better technologies. However, we need better policies with that. We need pros and cons to be weighed in. We want the government to find resolutions. And I think in addition to what I earlier said as special technology zones where we can have the business use cases, I think we need to create experience zones for consumers as well.
Right.
Maybe Blue Area in Islamabad, maybe Mall Road or Shara
Faisal, yeah.
Maybe we need to digitize them first, create and give them free licensing to 2 or 3 or all operators so that they can create use cases. They can let users experience 5G, businesses experience 5G, and once they will experience it, it's a freemium model with all gaming, with all apps, everything. And once you'll see that everything is kind of centered around those areas, then you can start scaling it up. I think that's where the government needs to be more lenient, needs to really go back to the table, figure out more creative ways on how best they can get the licensing fee. is an upfront licensing fee the best way? Shouldn't, I mean, I'm just a very loud, bold question would be, shouldn't the government be subsidizing this so that eventually the larger economy will benefit and we'll have a larger pie to earn from it, rather than just be a bottleneck as a licensing fee thing? So I think we need to really think through and have a very pragmatic discussion around it.
And especially when it's an export-based industry, I think, I mean...
And sorry to interrupt. So very important thing, what you just mentioned, our fastest growing exports is services exports. And that's where, again, it's all about services, all about connectivity right now. Whether you're offering management consulting, accounting outsourcing, software development, whatever it is, even virtual tourism. In case of COVIDs and those scenarios, I think give all the opportunity to, I mean, there's no reason we don't need better technology.
And I think when we talk about exports, a lot of times we're just focusing on sort of your conventional brick and mortar industrial exports. And the fact is that's a lot of capex. And that's also a lot of, it's very incremental. And so if you want to look at 100 million less than 30-year-olds getting into the job market over the next decade or so, you can't absorb them through your conventional means.
And Muzamil, sorry for interrupting you over and over again. This is another important thing. Services, and especially IT services, is the only highest trade surplus exports, which means you don't need to import much. You just you have the main ingredient, which is a human resource, which is the talent. You already have it in Pakistan. The only next ingredient they need is a laptop and a connectivity. And that's it. And they're all going to contribute to the economy if we provide them better laptops, better machines, and better connectivity. And they all will become actually a democratized economy where people can contribute positively. And the point of joblessness will actually not remain there, because people can become better entrepreneurs, better startups, existing companies will be able to produce better, and non-tech sectors will also be able to perform better. So I think there's a very less downside to it. Actually.
100%. And actually, I was a very interesting use case I was reading up on 5G was the future of jobs is actually changing as well. And while we talk about these technical roles and skill-based roles like IT, there's a huge incoming growth of personal assistants, personal. I mean, there was one job called personal shopper. That shops for people because they're so busy and because of the population demographic mismatch between the Western world and sort of the global South, there are huge, incredible opportunities coming up, and particularly in the Web 3.0 era. Again, I feel like we haven't even touched Web 3.0 in this conversation, because the fact is the world is going to really radically change over the next 3 to 4 years. And that's where the demand, what we've been missing, okay, maybe we don't need 5G, but Web 3.0 is going to radically change all of that, right?
Zamil, just digital tourism, virtual tourism alone, you know, assume another COVID, another epidemic. And you can, even Airbnb, the companies like Airbnb launched Airbnb virtual tourism, So, I mean, I think, and I know someone who told me from the US, a Pakistani, he called me and he said, you know what I did? I took a virtual tour of the pyramids in Egypt, and I hired a virtual tourist, a virtual guide, who was live on his phone
that's incredible.
And a GoPro. And he took us wherever he wanted to. And he was like their virtual assistant on virtual tourism. Just imagine Pakistan doing it in Honza, Gilgit, and northern, even Makli in south, in Punjab. I mean, I think there's so much opportunity on how better connectivity with less energy consumption and more stable connectivity, actually with low latency, can be really useful. Health, as Akram just mentioned, was just a very simple use case. We don't have telemedicine operating yet in Pakistan at scale. And startups like Sehat Kahani, what they're doing is they're delivering healthcare to the marginalized communities. And if we can just help them go beyond just clinical advice to actually doing procedures with 5G low latency connectivity, I think that's just one simple use case from a B2C consumer perspective.
100%.
There's no question.
We recently had a conversation with Famdar, if you guys can check that out as well. It's on the show. And do you know Famdar?
They just raised...
absolutely. And my mind was blown by what these guys were doing. because Pakistan has one of the lowest per acre yield for farms, and so these guys were basically, they're using satellite imagery to tell you exactly whether your plants need water or not, whether your soil has nitrogen or not. They're doing all of that real time, free of cost for farmers, anywhere in Pakistan. And that was just like, it was the tip of the iceberg, because first of all, there's a huge impending food crisis coming in globally, not just in Pakistan. We aggressively need to feed a growing population, and the fact is that until and unless we radically use these technologies to change the way that we're farming, we're not going to keep up. And so really, when I was talking to him, he was talking about, okay, so we're using primarily satellites because using drones is complicated and so on and so forth. And suddenly now, when earlier we were talking about agri-tech and stuff like that, I just realized you don't even need to have like a huge base on ground.
Yeah.
You just need autonomous drones.
Correct.
That fly out, give you a closer look of those farms, those plants, all of that data, and then transfer that data. And all of that high quality image data that's being transmitted cannot happen on 4G.
Yep.
You need 5G for that.
Yeah.
You need that real time analytics happening. And so that's a very real, I mean, that's a use case, sir, jo ke
Bare minimum, like
gali pe pahunch raha hai na?
absolutely. And all our villages are all agri-based. Everything is agri-based. So we need we are importing wheat because we're not improving on our productivity.
Yeah.
We need to really improve much faster. As you said, we are actually, I would say, I think this is an opportunity for the likes of Oppo to actually start doing R&D with our universities, bring the likes of Ericsson's and everyone to our universities, do R&D. And actually, I think we need our policymakers to actually create space for R&D to start with, and then some zones, experience zones for consumers, and for businesses, technology zones where they can develop products and services around it. I think then scale it out slowly and gradually, but I think there's no question we don't need it. We need to really, it's not just about leapfrogging, it's about life and death for us, probably.
Yeah, 100%. Guys, I'm going to wrap this up, but I'm going to ask a question that I generally ask all my guests. He's already answered it before, but I'm going to ask it in a different way so he can join in as well. If let's say we have a 5G rollout, the way that we sort of envision and are dreaming of, how do you imagine Pakistan of 2050? What could the world look like with the digital really happening the way that we expected? Yang, I'm going to start with you.
I really hope, for instance, when I look at China right now, I can see that a lot of people actually previously they were also struggle to turn to 5G. Like China, right now we are building a lot of station, but operators is still trying to educate when people accept 5G and 5G penetration grow more. I'm really hope Pakistan in the 2015 can somehow be more open and step even far more ahead, because I can see huge potential here. Whenever for instance, recently we have launched our 5G in the mid-range in the F series, F21 Pro 5G. We see huge comments on social media. Even before we launching the 5G, is people want 5G here. So I hope this kind of scenario will happen, and even maybe in 2015, there's a lot of new scenes originally from Pakistan and not from the other parts of the world.
Makes sense. Akram, what do you think?
I'm a traveler and I miss connectivity a lot when I travel to this Gilgit Hunza side, but I'm about to travel to Europe and I'm all happy and excited because I can be connected with my team. So my personal perspective is, if Pakistan gets a 5G, my kids can go to any place without any tension because they know they are connected. And so also this could boost industry and individualism a lot. Like everyone will grow and Pakistan will become a great place. I mean, I'm really positive about this.
Badar bhai?
I think, very simple thing is from a Pakistan perspective, we have very simple goals. We need to be economically stable. We need to be economically sustainable. We need to be actually a country where foreign direct investment is encouraged. We need to be a country where we need to not just export raw materials like the cottons, but also not only raw talent, but rather more value-added things. I think we are left behind. I'll just give you a quick small example how far behind we are right now. Singapore is half of Lahore by size. Singapore is also half of Lahore by population. It's just 5 million people. Their exports per year is $370 billion, over $370 billion. Pakistan's exports per year is around $26 billion. Just imagine how far behind in terms of per capita productivity we are.
Yeah.
I think I want to see a Pakistan where we are not only cash flow positive, all our economic indicators should be super positive. We have the biggest talent, which is human resource. I think we have the biggest opportunity to serve the world in better ways. We have the best doctors serving in Far Eastern countries like Brunei, to the US, to UK and Africa and in Middle East. Why can't our other doctors stay here and still serve using technologies like 5G or other improvements? So I think there's no reason that we need better technology so that Pakistan is in a better situation economically and socioeconomically, both ways, very, very quickly. I think every use case makes sense, but we need to educate our people, we need to educate our businesses, our SMEs, our women entrepreneurs, our youth on how to leverage these technologies in a positive way. And actually, I think that's where the use case for the government and academia come in educating all of this and scaling it up. So I certainly see a better Pakistan 2050, which is more stable, economically sustainable, and which is serving the rest of the world with high value exports as well, as Yang mentioned.
Inshallah.
Awesome. Sounds good. I hope that we see that future as well. Guys, thank you so much for coming in and sharing all the insight. I hope we get to see 5G soon, and maybe
Always
we
a
can.
player.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And for all of you guys, thank you so much for watching. If you like this episode, please do share it with your friends. For your YouTube audience, you can like the channel. It will increase the engagement and reach more people. For people on the audio platforms, you can subscribe to the platform and get notified for future episodes. For people on Facebook, there's a link down there where you can join the TBT community. We share different guest recommendations, articles, and get your feedback as well. You can join that as well. यहाँ पर कहीं पर easy पैसा jazz का इशारा होगा. If you'd like to support the channel, we accept anything from ₹1 to as much as you'd like. It's the thought that counts. But anyways, this was Sayyid Muzamil Hasan Zaidi. You were watching Thought Behind Things. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.